that often happens of people absorbing the arguments of opponents who do not wish you well. So, for instance, on interventionism, you never hear, in fact, I've said this to Majid before, but I've never heard anyone from the Islamic world say, thank God for NATO.
Yeah.
But they should.
But by the way, I'd spend the rest of my book debunking these,
sure.
just for everyone's,
but I mean, they shouldn't. The reason I mention this is for the selective historical reasons which we in the West are at risk of imbibing. For instance, I say, why does nobody say thank God for NATO? Because if NATO hadn't have intervened in Kosovo, I think it's widely agreed that a severe genocide would have occurred on the continent of Europe, worse than was already happening. NATO intervened. We don't expect thank yous endlessly, but once will be something. And
thank you, Douglas.
So I have. It's not enough. But this is just worth remembering, because a generation and a lot of people from a generation are at risk of imbibing basically the jihadists' arguments about us. And I just put that out there at the beginning. The second thing I'd just say quickly is, I mean, the fascinating thing now about looking at back, for instance, intervention in Afghanistan, is that, you know, it's one of the great fallacies of history which we're always vulnerable to, which is to think that everyone knew in the past what we know now. And, you know, until the 1980s, the major threat to countries like ours was global communism, the Soviet expansionism. We saw it as a major threat. And anyone who doubts that just has to say that, I mean, if up until, I've often thought of this, until as late as basically the 10th of September 2001, if you said, in the early years of the 21st century, politicians, journalists, public intellectuals and others are going to spend years talking about Islam. Say, what? Why? How come? It's not that interesting. It's not that vital in a bit of our society. It's not overwhelming. If you said, okay, you're going to be discussing Islamic blasphemy laws all across Scandinavia for years. Why?
And the jurisprudence of face veils.
Yeah, and like you're going to be the major debate in the UK in August 2018 is going to be the burqa. How does that happen? I don't see I don't see the way.
That is a bit surreal, isn't it?
So here's the deep underlying thing, which is that religion's back. And most people in the West don't know how to talk about it or think about it. And I've just got this endless concern about this matter, because I've had this conversation, as I think a lot of other people here have, for years with politicians and others, and they still don't understand the nature of this. And I just give you one example quickly. A little while ago, I was speaking to a TV producer who came over to me at a party somewhere and said, it was at the height of ISIS, and she said, what do ISIS want, Douglas? And I thought, oh, okay. Well,
they're actually quite upfront about it generally.
Yeah, they're quite. They've done a lot of speaking about this and a lot of writing, and they basically want to bring about they invite the world to Islam and bring about the end times. And this woman looked at me and she said, like, she said, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, they can't. I said, what do they really want? And I said, well, they say that they want to invite the world to Islam, or their version of Islam, and then will bring about the end of times. And she just looked at it like, I don't see that. I don't. So, and then I realized, well, if I just said to her, basically what ISIS are after is like a 2.5% reduction in VAT, she'd have been all over it. Oh, yeah. Oh, I see. Well, would they settle for 1.2? You know, we'd have been able to talk about it.
It is a bit high, isn't it?
Let's find some compromise. But she had no idea. And that for me, in a nutshell, is one of the things, one of the many things we're walking through at the moment is...
So once again, you have Douglas Murray bringing out some very salient points in terms of going back, like with revisionist history, and to ask these questions. and to basically say, yeah, you know what? Why is it that it's the West that it is the West that goes out to save people? It is the United States of America that is sort of, we don't want to be the police of the world. But when things go bad in a certain area, why is it that it is the United States of America, countries like Great Britain and other Western European democracies to a lesser point? But why is it that they're the ones that are going in with the United Nations to try to stop some of these genocides that are occurring in different parts of the world? Does anybody get any thanks? Anybody say, thank you, America? Thank you, Great Britain? Thank you, UN? Of course they don't. I thought it was pretty funny, though, when Douglas asked, one should, single thank you. And Majid goes, thank you, Douglas. That was, I mean, okay. But Douglas brings up the point that, yes, prior to, September 11th, nobody was thinking, religion? I mean, the only other thing that had happened at that time, was we were knowing what happened, with the Shah of Iran and the toppling and the Ayatollah Khomeini. And that was, pretty much it. But yes, our adversary at that point in time prior to that was global communism. Chinese, and even, I don't even think China was really on the radar that much back then. But to be saying that when Douglas brings up the point that you would be discussing blasphemy laws, discussing the burqa, discussing all sorts of Islamic theology and theocracy and how it pertains to the world, and then you have all these different terrorist groups that are forming, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and all the splinter factions, and the terrorist activities that were going to occur, and to be called America the big Satan and Great Britain its little brother Satan, and that we want to bring about the Islamic caliphate, Islamic theocracy all over the globe, and live under the rule that whatever it is that their version of Islam is going to be, these Islamists, and then prepare for the end times. I mean, absolutely. Who would have thought back then? They would have thought that you were crazy, just the same way as we're talking about what was happening. And what's happened is, folks, is that social media, to an extent, and not only that, but the ease of like travel, and then the news, and then what you see out there. So there's so many people that are looking in their own countries, hardship, famine, disease, death, destruction, whatever you want to call it, even being persecuted by the Islamists in their own country if they're coming from Muslim majority countries, and then seeing through whatever it is, either through other people that have gone before them, or seeing it in the news, online, through papers or whatever, and knowing that there's something better out there in the Western democracies that get to Europe, to get to England, to get to France, to get to Spain, to Italy, to the Norwegian countries, to the United States of America, to any of those countries, would be 1,000,000 times better than where they are right now. They're migrants, asylum seekers, refugees, whatever you want to call it. They're on the march. And this is what Douglas and we were, so many times we talk about in terms of how fast can we assimilate immigration without any kind of integration. And then these kind of problems are the ones that come up. Because people, they settle into these countries and decide that, we're going to bring everything from our country over there. That's some of the things that started the whole thing in the first place. Anyways, let's get back to more of Douglas Murray and some of his great thoughts and insights. That's what we have on tap for you today, folks. You're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, where I give you my political prescription from my political perspective. What happens when everything like this collides? Douglas Murray with these other great thinkers, culture, religion, media, entertainment, government, politics, religion, they all come crashing together. Let's get back to more of Douglas Murray right now.
World. I mean, it is impossible to find a manner of speaking which could simultaneously be you and a few people in a room, you and the people at your dinner, and possibly everyone in the world. It's jokes are the most obvious one. There is no joke so funny that it can be repeated to everybody in the world all the time.
Forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
And if there's, and we all know most jokes have some edge somewhere. Most of them are not going to last 5 years, let alone etc. So jokes are the obvious one. The other one is, and I was very worried by what Sam said about that, about the same self-censorship, or not self-censorship, but that thing of stepping back slightly, because what is the problem for politics in all of our countries at the moment? What has produced this backlash in politics? It's that we've had a generation of politicians who can never say anything meaningful in front of people. I mean, I spend a certain amount of my life on shows with politicians, and I know, and Majid knows, that basically you see it in their eyes.
Yeah.
The aim is to survive the next half hour without plausibly or otherwise being accused of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, or something else. And you can see it in the other politicians. There's no meaningful win. The hope is that the other person says something which allows you to say, I think that's quite offensive to X group of people. And then the person goes, oh no. And then they're on the ropes and you got them. And if you get enough other people, you destroy them and they're dead. And that's it. And the point is that this is why politicians can't say anything.
This could be your effect on these politicians.
But, yeah, it may be. But the point is that this is why politics is going bad, because you can't tell any truth to that kind of audience. Now, the problem is, if down from politicians, or up from politicians maybe, you have the same effect. Subject which is a more considerable landmine than many others as an issue. I think that one of the most important ground rules is this: you have to say, stop equating speech and violence. Stop saying, in all of this stuff, we need to find a way to think out loud. Okay, in a group like you're describing, or any other group, we have to find a way to think out loud and to try stuff out. Sometimes it will be wrong, often it'll be right, and so on, but we have to be able to have that ability. And one of the things that's stopping it is this endless equation of a thought that you've had and have voiced with the most extreme act of violence. So, for instance, if you say X, it's people like you that are the reason why so many of these people are killing themselves. You can't have any conversation if a part of the answer is being presented in that way. And I suppose just to see the people who are doing that as just using another tactic in order to win a particular sectional point, but allowing words to be words again is the beginning of some kind of solution. You know, it's a dialogue of the demented at the moment, where the society says, you know, there are some things we really strongly believe in, and if you don't believe in them, well, please do. It's not very assertively made. There's a sort of, well, what happens if I don't? Well, please do. There's no follow-up. There's a long way for this to run, and it doesn't all go in a good direction. There was a young girl, a commentator on the TV in London a couple of mornings ago, arguing about Trump and so on, as usual, not very enlightening discussion. She's arguing with Piers Morgan, and she says, you keep on saying I'm some supporter of Barack Obama. I mean, I'm a communist. She said, I'm literally a communist. Right. And thought, if this girl had said, you should be more careful. I'm literally a fascist. Yeah. By the way, edit that one carefully on that. No, I'm alive to YouTube.
That would be the New York Times headline.
Yeah, exactly. Literal fascist admits. But if this guy,
everyone is busy searching around. Like in Canada, one of the big discussion forums, the Human Rights Commissions found that there were like 11 people on this neo-Nazi forum, and it turned out half of them were working for the Canadian government trying to find neo-Nazis. Right. The Canadian government constituted 50% of the neo-Nazis in Canada. So they're scurrying around looking for the Nazis like this, and on the other side, it's like mainstream on the television. Yeah, I'm a communist. I'd love to go through.
You know, more great insight from Douglas Murray, but I just have to say that when Douglas is talking about the situation where, you know, before you have from the left and leftists, they would say silence is violence. So if you don't speak up, you're participating in the violence just by not speaking up in terms of on the leftist side. If you're speaking out or speaking up from the conservative side, oh, that definitely is violence. But if you're staying quiet from any side, then you're also committing violence. So there's that. So they're going to get you that way. Douglas is saying the other way they're coming at you is by saying that when you speak about any subject and there are people involved in that subject matter, well, because you're outspoken and you're speaking about it, people are dying. So you better not talk about it because people are committing suicide or people are dying. So now if you speak about it, people are dying. If you don't speak about it, you're committing violence. So I've said this so many times, folks, that on the left, they have gotten they're really experts in linguistic, what I call linguistic lingo. They put together words and phrases and adjectives and modifiers that evoke emotions. Sometimes those emotions, you know, tug at your heart. But if you really delve into what they're saying, you'll find out and say that, you know what? I know that's tugging at my heart, but in the long run, what they're saying is not going to work. It's not going to be a benefit. It might even just be a short-term temper. I mean, it feels good. It sounds good. But every time the left brings out their policy, they're the ones that bring about just a calamitous fall in what they're trying to accomplish. And then when that doesn't work, they bring about something else and double, triple down on it, try to fix a problem, and it just makes it even worse. So I think we've got to basically, you know, when we're out there and we're making our arguments, we're talking about it, basically is to brush that off. When they say something like, you know, what you're doing, to prove it. What are you talking about? Give me the stats. Where are the studies? What are you talking about? What happened in that community? What happened with that particular group of people? This is what they're doing with the transgenderism crowd, the Church of Transgenderism. That's what they're trying to do. They bring about the fact of the suicidal rates just go up because you're talking about it. Because nobody was affirmed. Well, if that was a question, shouldn't the suicidal rates of people have been even greater back in the day when we didn't even know the term transgenderism? It wasn't even talked about 30, 40, 50 years, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago? I mean, there should be people committing suicide all over the place if that's true. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow us. You all know what to do. Take a look at our video links above and below. Leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.